Show Drake May a little more love. Show the people where your
Want to
heart
say
is.
this? I think Drake May has the highest ceiling of those three quarterbacks. I think Drake May has a higher ceiling than Daniels and McCarthy. Pop, what's going on, man?
It's been a little while.
Has been a minute, man. It's good to be back here. Good to be recording. You guys, showed some love to the pre-recorded pods, which we appreciate. So we anticipate there's probably a lot of new listeners here. So guys, if you're new, if you've been watching the last few episodes and you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you like, tell your friends, check it out. But today, Pop, shockingly, talk a little bit of quarterback. Believe it or not.
I tell you, we got Bears fans stirred up with that
Oh,
last
man.
pod.
Yeah.
We threw them a little sucker punch saying, will the Bears pick Caleb number one, which obviously they will, but it was kind of interesting in the comments. Check it out if you haven't. The Bears fans going back and forth, kind of arguing. They're still kind of arguing over whether they'll trade the pick or not, which I find almost impossible to believe given the fact that they've traded their quarterback.
I'll tell you what, I think that is going to be our last Caleb Williams clickbaity title podcast for this year, because until we're talking about Caleb Williams winning a Super Bowl, which I've planted my flag on, but I think that's going to be the last kind of clickbaity thing, because there's reports coming out this morning, I'm reading on Twitter, that he's not taking visits with other teams.
I saw that too, yeah.
It's over. It's over.
Yeah, it's
it's over. We got.
But
screwed again.
Think you should. Still think you should make it the thumbnail because it gets clicks.
we got a little more integrity.
We got to have some integrity. Okay, I guess so.
A little bit. But hey, I did see Caleb Williams over the weekend at the airport. That was pretty crazy.
That's right.
That was wild. I did not have the Polinas to go say hi. I should have. And then the plane lands, and I get to my destination. And then who's in the terminal? Deshaun Watson. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, there's no way I just saw two NFL athletes in a span of 6 hours.
Tommy Hollywood.
Sure enough, man. It was wild. I also saw former Commanders quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick I saw at that airport not too long ago. And that's a guy with that beard. You don't have to do a double take.
You're not booking these guys as pod guests? What are you doing?
I know. We've been getting these blessings. I'm blowing it.
How about the Duke? How about the Duke?
Yeah,
did the Duke come on?
Man. Oh man, what could have been? I'd love to see Dookie on this pod.
That's a long story. That's a long story.
I might step down. It might be the Dookie Pop podcast. We get Dookie on here, man.
That's it.
Oh man. Anyways, let's keep this thing rolling. So we're gonna talk quarterback today. I mean, what are we doing? Draft is 17 days away, so this is like, this will be one pod, and then I guess we'll get two more in before the draft. But it's getting skinny. We're not going to have too many more pre-draft podcasts, which much to my chagrin. I just love sitting here breaking down these quarterbacks for you guys. So it's gonna be a bit of a bummer, but. Yeah, we had
a little OTA action this week. I know we're not going to get into it, but it's good to see some of the guys back in the building.
That's right.
Like a major love fest going on there, which is awesome.
The guys are back. Everybody's happy. Everybody should be happy. When you hire a new head coach, you get a new staff like this. If vibes aren't good at the first set of OTAs, you got a serious problem.
No doubt.
But it seems like everybody's having fun, getting along well. Deron Payne had some cool quotes about, his locker's right next to Bobby Wagner now and getting to, have that kind of situation. It's cool stuff. But Pop, who the heck are we going to pick at number 2? We've had some pretty clear quotes. It's the tea leaves are starting to read certain ways. But there's some conflicting reports here.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we've had weeks where it's all Daniels, and then this past week seems to be a little bit more leaning towards Drake May, although it's fairly split as you're about to get into. I really like I really don't have a good vibe on it, honestly, in terms of who they're going to pick. I could tell you who I lean towards favoring. Um, and yeah, if we read between the lines or between some of the stuff that we're going to go through here, we can maybe see if we get some clues. We're going to do a little detective work today.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little detective work today. A little what are two great detective duos? Starsky and Hutch. I'm going way back to the '70s. You may not even know who that is. I don't know.
Nope.
Yeah,
Not a clue.
we'll come
Not a
up with
clue.
something. We'll come up with something better than that.
But yeah, we got to start breaking down some of these quotes. So the first one, our local boy, JP Finley, via Sports Illustrated, he says he wants to be crystal clear that I don't know. Nobody does. But it seems they're leaning Jayden Daniels. If you think about the type of player you can get there, the immediate high ceiling he seems to offer repeatedly, Quinn and Peters have talked about how important mobility is in the modern game. So
JP
that's
doesn't miss much.
JP doesn't miss
Fresh
much.
quote from JP.
Yeah, JP doesn't miss much. He thinks it's Jayden Daniels there. I think there's a little bit of bias in that JP situation because he also wants Jayden Daniels. He said that before the process even
Does that make
began.
you
He said
sad? Does it
that's
make
who
you
I'd
sad?
pick. I disagree with him, but that's fine. Um, I'm not. You can't say who you like without immediately implying that you hate everybody else. I would. I'll say it again. I've said it a million times. I like Jane Daniels a lot. I think he's going to be a really good player. I right now am pretty firmly in the Drake May camp. I think it probably we'll get into exact breakdowns later.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but that's where I'm headed. But people are very high on Jaden Daniels. I'm very high on Jaden Daniels. I think he's a good option. But then our paisan over at Fox Sports, Ralph Vacchiano, he's reported that multiple sources have told him they don't believe May will make it past the Commanders at number two. Those sources believe that the interest in Daniels and McCarthy are simply smokescreens. So there's something to look at there. And then, of course, now this is the one that I put the most weight into personally, despite
Speaking of a
my
guy that doesn't miss much,
despite my feelings about the fella himself. And last time we were on here,
why do you hate?
something about his face, man. Just something about his face. He effed up my boy Tommy's retirement. That's why I hate. He effed up Tom Brady's retirement.
Oh, seems like
Uh,
that's a nice guy.
Yeah, but Adam Schefter,
Shefty.
ESPN's GOAT, he's the guy with all the inside scoop, regardless of whether or not he's getting him himself or people are feeding it to him because he's got the name recognition, whatever. He's the guy, and he says the Commanders are likely to take Jaden Daniels. He says, I know we're not supposed to spoil picks. We'll see how the Commanders decide to move forward with the number two overall selection. But he did say we pretty much, I think the exact quote is like, we can go ahead and pencil the Commanders in for Jaden Daniels at number two.
Yeah, pretty strong
And
words, right? I know we're
yeah,
not supposed to spoil picks. That's the first time I heard about the Shefty quote, but it's kind of the first time I actually read it in writing and with the context of it. And that's pretty strong. He called the Ben Johnson situation too, which
yeah,
he
and that
obviously
was
had some insight into.
Yeah, and that was a situation where, a lot of people are going, oh, it's definitely Johnson. There's no way. And then all of a sudden, Sunday night, he comes out and he says, I don't think Dan Quinn to Seattle, which was the favorite for Dan Quinn, I don't think that's a guarantee. And I also don't think Ben Johnson to Washington is a guarantee. And I'm willing to say that at least one, if not both, will not work out that way. And sure
Yeah.
enough, neither worked out that way. And that was the first, we'd heard rumblings, but that was the first. Actually, I'm sorry. At that point, we hadn't even heard rumblings. That was the first rumbling, and it was like an earthquake. For those of you on the East Coast, I know you guys had a couple of those. I'm
Oh
used to them
yeah, I
out
felt
here.
it.
I'm used to them out here. But that was the first rumblings of Johnson not coming to DC, and sure enough, Quinn ended up in DC and McDonald ended up in Seattle. So he was right. And him going to stick out his neck. This isn't just like a Mel Kiper or a McShay. This isn't one of those guys that get it wrong 90% of the time, but that's kind of their job to just take a lot of guesses and keep people coming back to the articles. This is a guy that is really sticking his neck out here with the kind of reputation that he has saying it's Jaden Daniels. Is there any reason to believe at this point that it's not Jaden Daniels, Pop?
To me, these are pretty powerful. And then we're gonna, there's a great article by John Keim with some Dan Quinn quotes that I quit Dan Quinn quotes. That's kind of easy to
A
say.
tongue twister,
That's
yeah.
not easy to say. That I think tip some hams as well. And I think you low key it, but JP Finley giving a quote out to NBC Sports Boston, and him saying, caging it, I don't know anything. He knows something. He knows something. He's got as good inside track maybe John Keim does as well, though Keim tends to not give predictions like that as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty powerful. I don't this Ralph Macchio guy from Fox Sports. I'm not sure. I haven't heard his name mentioned
Ralph
so
who?
much. That was a joke. Ralph Macchio. He's the Karate
Okay.
Kid.
Okay, good. I thought that was an unintentional slip there. I was like, hold
uh,
on a second.
no, you pronounce
That's
that
it.
beautifully. Ralph Vacchiano. Very, very well said.
Yeah,
A
man.
lot of
Well,
Americano would say Vacchiano or something like that. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Where's the smokescreen? Is the smokescreen with all the Daniels buzz? Is it May? Why even give a smokescreen? To be honest, like you got the number two pick. Essentially, that number two pick's almost like a number one pick because number one is such a lock with
yeah,
Caleb Williams. It's like the Commanders are pretty much on the clock at this point. So what are they smokescreening?
yeah,
Like, there's nothing that's going to amount. Maybe they don't want to give the Patriots an advantage, but yeah, it's really interesting. I think we should probably just get into, what we think about it. Maybe these Dan Quinn quotes, but yeah, those are pretty powerful statements from both Shefty and JP.
yeah.
I think.
To be honest with you, I think the Dan Quinn quotes are kind of not. They're kind of nothing to me. Like just reading through them here, I'm like, yeah, how
Uh,
quickly can a guy make the right decision? How quickly can he speed up when the blitz is coming? How quickly can he anticipate when those things happen? I mean, that's all just like he wants a quarterback that can
but then,
process the
then,
play
then,
well.
then
That's kind of
say what he
a
says
nothing
about
burger.
the players, though.
About the players, so he says Daniels, he says, man, they have had concepts and looks and different things that Jayden has been able to process through things really quickly, which he really liked. And then about May, he said, what you see is the ability to create and get outside on the run. If the protection breaks down, boom, he can create and go. I thought that's one of his superpowers for sure. So, in my opinion, you look at both of those quotes, whatever your agenda is, it supports it. I think. I think if you want to look at those quotes and you
Maybe.
want to say, "Oh, he said May's superpower is being able to when the protection breaks down, create and go," and then you go back to the first quote and say, "Well, what do you do when the play breaks down?" And then he said, "That's May's superpower. He wants May," and then you can go back to the first quote and say, "Oh, he said he wants good processing speed, and he likes Daniel's processing speed." It's Daniel's. It's a non. That
See,
to
but
me is kind of a nothing burger.
I kind of read it, and again, I think I'm closer to neutral than you are when this comes situation. Although I know I favor slightly Daniels, but it depends on the day. Again,
Yeah,
you've been talking up May and sending me highlights, sending me clips, and talking about he's certainly got incredible arm talent. I think
yeah,
his arm talent is as good as it gets, and that's certainly when you're talking quarterback, that's super tempting. So I'm on record to say whatever AP and DQ come up with, and if you want to give Kingsbury a little bit of credit too, I'm good with. They know much more about this, and I think our next topic will get into how either one they pick, if they coach them upright, I think they can make them successful, and that's the
yeah,
good news about being a number two and being having these options. But I read here, trying to be as neutral as I can. Maybe I'm not. But he talked about processing speed, and that's what the buzz you hear. You know, Daniel's ability to process that has nothing to do with his legs or his speed or any of that. That's pure drop back quarterback talk. And
yeah,
they're impressed with that, right? And with May, what does he say? Athlete. That was his previous quote, good athlete. Well, do you really want a guy who's the best trait you could talk to about as well? He can scramble and get out outside the pocket and make good plays. Those guys are a dime a dozen. I mean, Sam Howell can do that. right? Now I'm
Please.
not comparing May to Hal. I'm not.
I just
But
want to
I'm
make it
just
one
saying.
podcast without saying that word. Just one podcast. It's been a
But
year of my life.
what I read between the lines there is more Daniels than May. But again, we're Starsky and Hutch,
Yeah.
you know, trying to figure this out. Let's
Can I
let's
be
get
can I
into
be
what
Hutch?
I don't know which one's which if I'm being honest.
I don't either, but Hutch is a cooler sounding name.
One's a
I want to be
blonde
Hutch.
dude and one's a brunette. But anyway, um,
Anyways, yeah,
let's talk about what we would do. What would we do at this point? Even though
yeah. So so we're gonna do like 100. You got $100 to put down
right,
on your favorite betting site, FanDuel,
right.
DraftKings, whatever it is, Dom and Pop Bet, whatever the case may be. Dom and Pop Bet. We don't operate
Whoever, look, we're
online.
open for business. Whoever wants to sponsor us, we'll be happy to repeat your name every couple of minutes.
We work directly through Dom and Pop Bet. We don't operate online though. It's a different situation with our culture. None of this online stuff. The lines might be a little funny. But anyways, out of $100 to spend, you've got the Commanders are going to pick. So we're trying to predict who they're picking, not necessarily who we would pick. Out of the three
I think
guys,
it's a mix of both. It's your own personal bias and opinion, but yeah, to some degree, predicting who you think they should pick. I guess.
Daniels, May, McCarthy are the three
Yeah,
guys we're going to choose from. Obviously, I think the trade out and pick Bo Nix, trade out and pick Michael Penix. I think those
ain't
options
happening.
are off the table. It's not happening. It's not worth discussing.
Yeah,
So Pop, why don't you go first? How are
I
you
get to
splitting
go
that up?
first.
How are you
I was
splitting
going
that
to
up?
give the dramatic second thing. Well, I'll cut to the chase. JJ McCarthy gets $0, zero of my hard-earned dollars. I think he's off the table. I think there's no chance of that surprise, and I think he's clearly number 4, in this group. Now, I do think he potentially could be a really good player. I think to some degree he's the lowest risk of this group. He might be the most pro-ready, especially if
Yeah,
you have him be more of a game manager than rely on him too much. I think he could do some good things. He could be a good player, but I think just in terms of where we are right now, I give $0 to him. Like I said, I'm on the fence. I'm going to go $55 to Daniels, give him the slight edge, and
yeah,
$45 to May. That's where I'm at. For me, Daniels is it's just that. It's just the fact that, it's what Dan Quinn said. Dan Quinn talked about his abilities as a quarterback, not so much as a running quarterback, but the fact that, people talk about the flaws of each guy, but if Daniels can develop in his flaw, which is a risk for both guys, and you got that superpower of his legs and his speed, it just drives defenses nuts, and that really intrigues me, and that's why I lean Daniels. But it's close. Now
yeah,
I'd be happy with either guy.
yeah. I'm gonna go if we're mixing in our personal opinions here too. Then I'm gonna narrow the gap a little bit. I think if we're doing just straight up who's gonna be the pick, I think you nailed it personally. But so I'm gonna say I'm gonna put 45 on Daniels, and then 30 on May and 20 on McCarthy. Or
Wow,
25 on McCarthy. 30 on May, 25 on McCarthy. Um,
I'm surprised.
I like me some JJ McCarthy, man. I'll be honest. I really like JJ. There is I think there's a lot of things about J. I haven't had the chance to talk about JJ McCarthy as much on this pod, but I talk with a couple friends about him often. I really like him. I think he's a really good football player. I don't think I think he's too controversial to be the pick at number 2 right now, but I personally think that's BS. I don't think he should be that controversial. I think he's a really good football player. I think he's going to end up if he ends up in a place like Minnesota. Let's say Minnesota gets aggressive and trades up to 4 and picks him. He's going to end up making picks 2 and 3 look silly. I think he's going to look really good if he's in a good situation like that.
He's the least
Um,
sexy of the 3 options, but that doesn't
he's
necessarily mean he won't be as
he's the
successful or more successful.
He's the least sexy of the three options. I think his floor is the highest by far of the four options. I think his floor is higher than Caleb's as well. And I think his ceiling is
That's
comparable.
a big statement.
I think so. And I think his ceiling is comparable to that of May and Daniels. I think it's a little bit less, but I think the difference between the floor is much larger than the difference between their ceilings, if that makes sense.
Let's
So
hear
that's what
from you. Let's hear from you in the comments.
I know where I stand. I'm confident in it. But yeah, guys, bring the
But
smoke.
you're downplaying your man crush on May. You're wearing out my text
I think
messenger,
May has the
sending me clips,
all
talking
right.
about how he's your guy. Come on, show Drake May a little more love. Show the people where
You
your
want a
heart
sentence?
is.
I think Drake May has the highest ceiling of those three quarterbacks. I think Drake May has a higher ceiling than Daniels and McCarthy. Personally,
Yeah,
you win the game in the air, and that guy has an arm like we have not seen in this draft since probably Herbert, and I think he's of the Herbert Allen ilk in terms of arm talent and ability to create plays. Obviously not there yet, but let's not forget Josh Allen was not there yet either when he got drafted. It took Josh Allen years, multiple years of looking like ass to start putting it all together. So I think May is more in that camp. I don't think May is as pro ready as Herbert was, but Herbert was getting people were saying he
but
was way overdrafted where he got drafted. They
I
were
think
saying
it's
he's most
difficult
likely to
for
be a bust.
I think it's difficult for a quarterback in this town to survive multiple years not playing well.
Why do you think we've
I
been
don't
losing
really
for
get
30
that.
years?
You're right. You're spot on right. You're spot on right. That's not the right approach. Maybe
Not
this
at
new
all.
regime will be different, but I think it's still this town and Josh Harris wants to win and he's got a lot of good reasons. He's got to get fans back in the seat.
Sure.
But none of these three guys are guaranteed of being able to do that out the gate. I don't quite understand the higher ceiling for Drake May thing because I just feel like if I said to you, you get Lamar Jackson esque player, but who's much more impressive as a passer from the pocket, even at this stage in his career.
That's a.
Why would
I
that?
don't
Why
agree with
would
that, but
that? Well, no, I'm saying as he's much further advanced than Lamar was as a rookie, by
sure.
all
Yes.
accounts.
Yes.
Much
Yes.
further advanced. He's a
Yes. I agree
you
with
know
that.
he's a
I agree
good
with that.
pocket quarterback,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So that's my thing. Is like I don't understand why if he puts it together that and with his just dynamic speed, you know, I mean, I thought it was great in the comments. Somebody said, "When's the last time a dual threat quarterback won a Super Bowl?" And I wish I would have thought to reply with this. And somebody said, "Patrick Mahomes." And when you got a guy that can kill you with his legs and his arm, to me, there's a high ceiling there for Daniels as well. I'm not going to
Sure.
say which one's higher, but I think it's
I
really
just
good. But
if you're looking at for me, why I have May's ceiling higher, and I'm not comparing them to these players yet. I'm also not copying Daniels um to what's his face to Lamar yet. But if you're telling me best case scenario, your quarterback is either going to develop into Lamar or into Josh Allen, I'm taking Josh Allen talent wise. There's
I
not
don't think I agree with you there.
when Josh Allen plays at his best, and there's a lot of you have the mental bias in terms of the mistakes that Josh Allen makes. This kid's not Josh Allen, so he's not going to have those mistakes, hopefully. But talent wise, in this league, do you want a 10 out of 10 runner and an 8.5 out of 10 passer, or do you want a 10 out of 10 passer and an 8.5 out of 10
You know
runner?
what?
I'm going that way. I'm
I'm
going
leaving
passer.
this response up, and I'd be very disappointed if we don't get one to the Ravens insider. We got to hear from the Ravens insider in the comments. I want to hear what he has to say about that statement.
You'd rather have Josh Allen's talent profile than Lamar's talent
I'll take
profile
Lamar.
by a mile.
I'll take Lamar.
Neither of them have a Super Bowl yet, so I guess we'll see who
Yeah,
settles that first. Not getting any better for Allen though, losing Steph Diggs. How about that? That's
crazy
pretty
news.
wild. Pretty wild. Probably the biggest story out of the NFL last week for sure. But we're so wrapped up in quarterback talk in this town, we don't got any time for that. Anyways, Pop's got a draft hypothetical he wants to float to me. I have no idea what's going on. Hit me, Pop.
No, I was just saying if we package those top two, those are 2 second round picks. How high up would you want to go in the first round to make that worth it to you? What pick would make, where's that threshold of, if we got number 15 for those 2 second round picks, would you do it? If it's more in the 20s, would you do it? Like that's the hypothetical.
Uh, I have a hard time answering that, honestly. As high as you can go. I mean, yeah, if we can package those two and go get it, more depends on who's on the board. But if there's a tackle that you thought was going to go in the top 10 and he's sitting there at 13 or 14 and you can go get him and you got to give up those two, yeah, go get him. Like if a Fashanu or who's the other kid out of, I'm losing his name. He's got a tough name. Not Joe Alt, if it's the other guy. But if it's one of those guys, sure. It just depends on who's on the board.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. I think if the player is there and is dropped, that's actually the most intelligent answer. Because I heard this debate on sports radio and they were given numbers, and I guess the numbers came with the assumption of, say you do it if you can get into the top 15, maybe 15 to 20. If you get into the 20s, maybe not. But you're right. If the player is there who they've got very high on their board and he's slipped and that's who they want to go get, I'm all for it. I'm all for trading up, especially if
Yeah.
it's go get an offensive tackle for sure.
Yeah, they did that with Montez Sweat years ago during the Gruden era, right? They didn't think they
Yeah.
wanted to take Sweat where they took Haskins, and then Sweat fell down the board a little bit, and they went back up and got him. But anyways, let's get into this here. This is an important topic. We're probably gonna go a little quick on it. But what are the keys?
15 to 25
We've talked about the little 15 to 25 actually. We've talked
at the
about
25-minute mark.
we've talked about who we want, right? Now let's talk about what are the keys to bringing in a quarterback, regardless of who it is. What do we need to do offensively, defensively, special teams? What do the equipment managers need to do? You heard Giannis say when the Bucks were struggling, and the laundry boys need to do better. What does everybody need to do in order to put this guy in a better situation than we put our previous young quarterbacks in, and to allow him to be successful for the long term? What are some things we need to do as a team? That's this topic here. Um, so what do you think, Pop? I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about. We could talk about running the football. We could talk about bolstering up on defense. We could talk about the offensive line. Let's do this. What jumps out to you about what we should do and why? What's like a pick one key takeaway about what we should do to develop this young quarterback?
To me, a young quarterback's or almost any quarterback's best friend is a really good run game and play action,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's something that didn't even seem to be in our playbook, right, for the last couple of years, right? So what I love, and John Keim had a great article about this, is that the way this, you might think Kingsbury, what do they call it? The run and
Air
what
raid.
is this air raid offense? I drew a blank there, but it really feels like Dan Quinn's putting his stamp on what he wants and how they built out the rest of the offensive staff. And I think Kingsbury is out to prove a little bit on I'm not just an air raid guy. He said as much in his presser. And I think they are going to emphasize the run game. And I love the combination of Robinson and Eckler. And Eckler was on the radio again this week, and he's done a couple of interviews, and he talked about what attracted him to Washington was he doesn't want to necessarily be that star back. He likes the fact that it's a duo with him and B Rob, and he's out to prove himself. And I really think that that run game and that pass game, and also by featuring the running backs, some of that screen game, right? That it's not just featuring the running backs in the run game, but giving your young guys some layups. And I'm just a big believer that you got to just build with a young player and building blocks. You
Yeah.
know, So make this thing as easy as that on them as you can. And I think run game and play action off that run game is a quarterback's best friend, especially a young quarterbacks. That'd be my one thing for sure. And it seems like that's if you read this article, it seems like that's what they're planning to do, which is music to my ears.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think run game would probably be up there for me. I don't necessarily think it's at the top. I think the most important thing for me is and the reason why it's not at the top is I think we're so like hyperbolically fixated on the run game now after last year because last year was just such an extreme example with Eric Bieniemy and just how awful the run game was. And the run game wasn't bad. It just he wouldn't press square to call the run play. I mean, it's just he just wouldn't call the run plays. When we ran the ball, we actually ran the ball quite effectively.
Yeah.
But
Well, we did it opposite, right? We did the play action run
yeah,
because they were convinced we were going to pass, and
all the delayed
we
all
ran
the
the
delayed
ball.
handoffs.
If that's even a thing.
All the delayed handoffs. For me, what I'm most focused on with this team is going to be the defense in terms of building up a young quarterback. And I think the run game is very important. I think the scheme is very important as well. And that's a little too close to run game. That would be my number one focus is keeping him in rhythm, running a very young quarterback friendly offense, not running these routes that take 25 minutes to develop down the field
Yeah,
when
a
you've
quick
got
pass
Andrew
game.
Wiley at the right tackle. You know, getting that scheme very young quarterback friendly with the coaching staff, with Kingsbury and what's his face, Brian Johnson. A lot of what's his face today for me, Brian Johnson. Getting those two guys in synergy with the young quarterback is very important. But for me, most important is going to be that other side of the ball, that defense, because when our young quarterback throws a pick in a crucial situation, can our defense make a stop, get him the ball back, and get him another chance? So he doesn't have to sit and think about that interception for the rest of the week and how he blew the game. Can our defense bail us out when we go into these situations? And I'm saying when because they happen with every young quarterback. And it's essential that you have a good defense, keep them competitive, maybe win some games for us, keep things moving forward, and not consistently put because why is the offense in passing situations? Because the defense can't stop the other team. That's what
Yeah,
puts you in a passing situation more often than not is you're down 7, you're down 10, you're down 14. Now you got to air the ball out. You have to get away from the run game. So in order to establish the run, you've got to play good defense. Those two things have to go hand in hand. So for me, getting that defense working, Dan Quinn is a great defensive mind. We know that. But we've seen his defenses when he's been a head coach lack a little bit. So you brought in Joe Witten Jr. from Dallas. You're going to hopefully run that same style of defense over here. You've put a big emphasis on it. You've talked a lot about how you've learned from your previous mistakes in Atlanta. You're going to delegate more. You're going to be on the ground coaching, motivating the guys, letting your guys run the defense. You're not going to take on as much. So let's see it. Put your money where your mouth is. I want to see this defense turn around. We're going to need to be a winning football team in this league, you're going to need a top 15 defense to have a shot. So let's get that defense out of that number 32 slot. Let's get moving up into that, 15 to 12 area. I don't know if we can do that with the talent we have. I think that's ambitious for such a turnaround, but let's see. Let's see if we can push into that instead of bottom third of the league. Let's see if we can just push into that middle third. Can we be 18? Somewhere in that middle group for the defense, I think that's going to be key. Creating takeaways, giving whoever that quarterback is, almost said Jayden Daniels, giving whoever we pick a short field. Give them 15 yards to go get a touchdown because we got an interception on the first drive. Stuff like that. Um, that's for me what I think is going to be the most important is that
yeah. I mean,
defense.
I think they go hand in hand, though, right? Like an improved defense is important, but if the offense keeps giving them the ball back and putting them in bad situations, and there isn't
Of
that
course,
balance, and they aren't killing some clock and sustaining drives, I think that the defense isn't going to be good enough to withstand just constantly getting the ball, back and being on the field so much. So I think
sure.
it does go hand in hand. But you're right. You're spot on. when the defense does have the opportunity or the offense does have a good drive and scores, it's the defense has to step up. The defense
Yep.
has to take some pressure off this young quarterback. I totally agree with you there. It's spot on. And I think just going back to the running game, the good news is any of these top four quarterbacks can also be a threat with their legs, right? We've seen, you know, Danny Dimes in New York even kill us with his legs, right? So you don't necessarily have to be that, Jayden Daniels or Lamar Jackson type to be a threat. And I think they've got to, it's a combination of, and then some of the short passing game can be considered an extension of your run game. It's all of those things. So it gets the defense back on their heels a little bit where they just can't put their airbacks and come after the quarterback. And then you look at a Drake May or you look at a Daniels, Jayden, they can throw the deep ball. They've got good deep ball accuracy, and if you
Yeah.
can get the defense back on their heels and then get some deep game going as well, I think it could be a really great recipe. I mean, the other thing that the Kimes articles points out is how they've built the support staff. They
Yeah.
brought a Marcus Mariota. I keep wanting to call him Martin. Uh, number 0 in your program, 1 in your hearts. They brought a vet in to be there with the young guy. They've just got a heck of a coaching staff in terms of keeping Tavita Pritchard, getting Johnson from the Eagles to help coach this young kid up. I think that support system is going to be there, but it just seems like a different level when you hear quotes from this coaching staff about how they're going to coach up this young QB. And that's why I feel so confident that no matter who it is, no matter who they think is the right pick, I think that this is going to be a different story with this rookie QB. I think we're going to see some good things because I don't think they're going to put the weight of the world on that quarterback's shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the most important thing is just getting that together. And, I mean, Austin Eckler's a touchdown machine. You end up in
Yep,
those red zone situations. That's a guy that even not in his prime anymore. I think everybody could say he's probably lost a step or two. Even a guy that's not
I'm sure about
necessarily in
that.
his prime anymore. He's yeah, I'm not sure about it either. We'll see.
I'm not sure about that.
That high ankle can hurt, but you got a running back at almost 30 coming off a high ankle sprain. That's a little nerve wracking. But anyways, you've got him there, you've got B Rub there, you've got Terry there, you've got Jahan there. Lord knows, I mean, can we pray that the talent that Jahan Dotson showed his rookie year, can we get back to some of that next year? If we can do that, all of a sudden we've got a good wide receiver core. I mean, we did lose Curtis Samuel, who I think was really, really good, and he'll be the man over in Buffalo this year. We'll get to see what he looks like with a lot more targets, apparently. But I think this is going to be a very the support staff is sneakily better, especially with the way they've added at that offensive line. You've got a reliable tight end, which is always good for a young rookie quarterback. So I think we're doing all the right stuff there.
Well, and you
Um,
said you called it before last season about how B Rob would be featured more in the pass game, and I was skeptical.
yeah,
Unfortunately, he wasn't featured enough in the run game, but I think that if you can get some layups to those guys that they turn into 10, 15, 20-yard gains, I mean that's the kind of support a quarterback needs, and I think the thing that you need with this situation more than anything, and if I had to give one other key word, it's patience.
yep,
You're probably going to have some situations where you run the ball on first and second down and you get stuffed. You can't just get away from it or panic and get away from it. Just because you're down a touchdown doesn't mean it's time to just start dropping the kid back every down because we got to come back. It's one score. So that patience, I think, is going to be key to stick to your game plan, stick to what you're doing. A running game, sometimes it takes time in the course of the game. And we've invested in that interior of the offensive line, which could make a really big difference in all of this, too. And I think if, an offensive line that knows they can get downhill often, sometimes you could take
yeah,
a mediocre offensive line, but just knowing that they're in attack mode, they can perform much better than maybe what their talent level is.
yeah. We saw Rivera do that in 2021. I mean, aside from Brandon Sheriff, there was nobody on that offensive line, and they actually performed pretty well
Yep.
because they were run first. They had to support Heineke. They were playing with the backup quarterback all year. That kind of situation. So yeah, I think that's all. That's all really good stuff. So just to clarify, one quick thing, Pop, before we wrap this up, you're saying hypothetically, if you find yourself down 27-3 against the Chicago Bears on Thursday night in week 5, in a relatively meaningless game in the scope of the season, we shouldn't then drop our quarterback back 55 straight times and just nuke his confidence for the rest of the year. You're saying we shouldn't do that,
No, I
hypothetically
think
speaking.
I think it's a bad idea.
I agree. Again, these are purely hypothetical situations we're drawing up
It's a
here.
bad idea.
But what do you say we wrap this thing up, Pop?
We need to.
All right. I've been Dom.
This is Pop. Had fun.
Thanks for another great week, guys.